I had invested, 25, in a family vacation to Orlando, envisioning cherished moments with the people I loved most. But standing at the airport, my own son looked at me and said, "I completely forgot to get you a ticket. You should probably just head home." It became clear they had orchestrated this from the start, planning to discard me like an inconvenience. 3 weeks later, they came back, their jaws dropping, when they saw a distinguished man in a tailored suit standing by my side, a man who was about to dismantle the world they had built on my generosity. "Mom, I have some unfortunate news." Mark's voice sliced through the cacophony of the terminal like a sharp piece of glass. I paused, my carry-on suitcase nudging the back of my leg. The American Airlines check-in desk stretched before us, a chaotic scene of families wrestling with oversized bags and Disney-themed backpacks. "What sort of unfortunate news?" I asked, but a knot was already tightening in my stomach based on his strained tone. He refused to make eye contact, fixing his gaze on the massive departure board, his hands buried deep within his pockets. "I forgot to purchase your plane ticket." The words seemed to hang in the air, thick and suffocating. All around us, travelers hurried by, clutching their boarding passes, their animated conversations about theme parks and sunshine, suddenly sounding like a cruel taunt. "You forgot?" My voice was a whisper, far weaker than I intended. "Mark, we've been coordinating this trip for the last 3 months." "I know, Mom. I know." He finally glanced at me, but only for a fleeting second. There was just so much to manage, and work has been absolutely insane. "I gave you 25-0, I stated, the number feeling foreign and heavy on my tongue. "For all of us. For the entire family." "Right. And we're so grateful for that, Mom. We really are." Mark checked his watch, his eyes darting toward the departure gates. "But the problem is, the flight is about to start boarding." I was already making my way to the check-in counter, pulling my suitcase along. Its wheels snagged on a crack in the floor, sending a jolt through my shoulder, but I pushed on. This had to be a mistake, something that could be fixed. "Excuse me," I said to the woman at the counter. Her uniform was a crisp navy blue, her smile impeccably professional. "I need to see what flights you have going to Orlando today." She began typing on her keyboard. "Of course, ma'am. What is the name on the reservation?" "Helen Miller. But it seems there might have been a problem with my booking." More typing followed, then a brief pause. Her professional smile wavered just a bit. "I'm not finding any reservation under that name, ma'am. Are you certain it was booked with American Airlines?" My chest constricted. It has to be. My family is on that flight. I glanced around for Mark, but he had drifted several yards away, now pacing nervously near the entrance to the security checkpoint. "Let me try a more extensive search," the agent offered kindly. "What were your intended travel dates?" "Today. For the flight leaving now. My son and his family should already be ticketed." She nodded, her fingers dancing over the keyboard as she scrolled through a long list of names on her screen. "I do see a reservation for Mark Miller. A party of 4, departing at 4:15, but there is no Helen Miller associated with that booking." The terminal floor seemed to shift beneath my feet. "That's not possible. Please check it one more time." "I have checked twice, ma'am. Would you like me to look into standby options?" A sliver of hope sparked within me. "Yes, please. Anything at all." "I am so sorry, but we are completely full today. There's a major conference in Orlando this week." "What about tomorrow? First class even. I'll pay whatever it takes." Mark suddenly materialized at my side, his hand gripping my arm. "Mom, we need to talk." I tried to shake him off. "Not right now. We're trying to solve this." "No, we're not." His grip became firmer, pulling me away from the counter. "This isn't going to work out." The airline agent was watching us now, her expression filled with a growing unease. Other passengers started to notice the scene we were creating. A young child pointed at my suitcase, which had tipped over when Mark grabbed me. "What do you mean it's not going to work?" I demanded, righting my luggage with trembling hands. "There has to be another flight, another airline." "Mom, you need to listen to me." Mark's voice had a sharp, unfamiliar edge. "The vacation is happening now. My family is already past security, so we find another way for me to get there. No. The word was flat, absolute. We don't. The departure board flickered, updating with new information. The 4:15 flight to Orlando now flashed with the words, "Final boarding call" in pulsing red. "Mark, you're frightening me. What is happening?" He checked his watch again, a gesture that was now openly aggressive. "What's happening is that you need to go home, Mom. We'll figure out the vacation on our own." "Figure it out?" My voice cracked. "I paid for the entire thing. The hotel, the rental car, all the activities for the children. And we appreciate it," he said dismissively. "But standing here arguing is a waste of time for everyone." The air conditioning hummed overhead, but I felt a dizzying heat wash over me. Nothing was making sense. 3 months of meticulous planning. 25. 0. Countless family dinners spent discussing roller coasters and character breakfasts, and now Mark was treating me like a bothersome obstacle. "Just go home," he repeated, already backing away toward the security line. "We'll call you when we get to the hotel." It was in that moment that I saw it clearly in his eyes. It wasn't panic over a ticketing error. It wasn't guilt over a careless mistake. It was relief. Mark turned and melted into the crowd, heading for the gate. He left me standing there, a solitary figure next to my suitcase in the middle of the bustling terminal, watching my son disappear, as if he had been rehearsing this exact moment for weeks. The American Airlines counter felt like the only solid thing in a world that was spinning out of control. I walked back to the same agent, who recognized me instantly. "Ma'am, were you able to resolve things with your family?" "Actually," I said, my voice sounding much steadier than I felt, "I need you to look up something for me. That reservation for Mark Miller. Can you tell me when it was booked?" She hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the security checkpoint, where Mark had vanished. "I'm not really supposed to share booking details," but her fingers were already moving across the keyboard. "It looks like it was booked 6 weeks ago. Party of 4. 2 adults, 2 children. 6 weeks ago. Not 3 months ago when we first dreamed up this trip. Not last week when Mark assured me he was finalizing all the details. 6 weeks ago when he had already made the decision to exclude me. And were there any changes made to the reservation since then? To add another passenger? No, ma'am. The booking has remained the same since it was first made." My legs felt like they might give out. I gripped the edge of the counter, the cold metal, a stark contrast to the heat rising in my face. "What about any other airlines? Anything at all to Orlando today, tomorrow, anytime this week?" She searched again, her expression becoming more sympathetic with each failed attempt. "I'm afraid it's the conference. Delta has a waiting list of over 50 people. United is booked solid until next Tuesday." Next Tuesday. The words left a bitter taste in my mouth. By then, their vacation would be more than halfway over. "There is one possibility," she offered quietly. "Spirit has a red-eye tonight with 2 stops. It would get you there on Thursday afternoon, but it's incredibly expensive for a last-minute booking." "How expensive?" Yuan. I reached for my purse, but my hand froze. I could see the gate for the Orlando flight in the distance. Mark would be on the plane by now, probably sending a text to Jessica, telling her the problem me had been handled. "Ma'am?" The agent's voice seemed to come from a great distance. "He knew," I murmured, more to myself than to her. "This whole time, he knew. I'm very sorry." I looked at her kind face, at the genuine concern she had for a bewildered older woman, and I was suddenly mortified. This wasn't her burden to bear. This was a private family matter, the kind of devastating truth that should be kept behind closed doors. "The flight," I asked. "Is it still boarding?" "Final call was 10 minutes ago. They're likely closing the doors as we speak." As if cued by her words, an announcement crackled over the intercom. "American Airlines Flight 812 to Orlando is now closed for boarding. All ticketed passengers should be on board." I turned my gaze toward the gate. Even from this distance, I could see the last few passengers hurrying down the jet bridge, children in tow, their carry-on bags bouncing behind them, families, heading to a magical vacation together. My phone vibrated. A text from Mark. "Sorry, Mom. We'll call from the hotel. Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself." as if I was some fragile burden he had finally managed to unshoulder. The agent cleared her throat. "About that spirit flight, ma'am. Should I hold it for you while you think about it?" I stared at the screen of my phone. No real explanation. Not even a semblance of a sincere apology. Just a casual dismissal, after he had taken 25 and months of my joyful anticipation. "No," I said, sliding the phone back into my purse. "No, I don't think that will be necessary." "Are you sure?" "I can hold it for 15 minutes. I'm sure, because in that moment, standing in the terminal surrounded by the scent of coffee and the sound of rolling luggage, I understood something profound. This wasn't about a forgotten ticket or a simple planning oversight. This was about who they perceived me to be. This was about how they thought they could treat me. The departure board updated again. Flight 812 now displayed the word departed in stark black letters. Mark and his family were in the air, probably clinking their plastic cups of complimentary soda, congratulating themselves on a well-deserved getaway. I took hold of my suitcase handle and walked toward the exit. But I wasn't defeated. Far from it. Every step away from that gate was a step toward absolute clarity. They had made a calculated decision about Helen Miller. They assumed I would quietly go home, perhaps complain to a friend, but ultimately accept being cast aside. They were about to discover just how profoundly they had miscalculated. The automatic doors slid open, and I stepped out into the afternoon sun, already formulating my next move. Behind me, the terminal was a hive of activity, full of travelers heading to their destinations. I was heading to mine as well. It just wasn't the one they had planned for me. The taxi queue was longer than I would have liked, but I found myself grateful for the wait. It gave me a moment to think, to let the chaotic pieces of the afternoon settle into a coherent picture. "Where to?" the driver asked as I heaved my suitcase into the trunk. He was a middle-aged man with a weary look, no doubt from battling airport traffic all day. "Chestnut Hill," I said, settling into the back seat. My phone was still in my hand, Mark's pathetic text message glowing on the screen. As we pulled away from PHL, I gazed out at the familiar Philadelphia skyline. The city stretched out before us, filled with homes where other families were likely gathering for dinner, sharing stories from their day, making plans for the future, not scheming to exclude their own mother. "Tough day?" the driver asked, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror. "It's getting tougher by the minute," I admitted. I'm not usually one to confide in strangers, but the anonymity of the cab felt freeing. "Have you ever had your own family turn their back on you?" He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Lady, I've got an ex-wife who has been plotting my demise for a decade. Family are the only ones who know exactly where to twist the knife." Twist the knife. That was precisely what it felt like. A sharp, calculated blow aimed directly at my heart. As we drove, I began to replay conversations from the past few months. In March, when I first proposed the idea of doing something special for the grandchildren, Mark's response had been immediate and enthusiastic. "Mom, that's a fantastic idea. Let me handle everything." In April, when we all sat around Jessica's dining room table looking at resort brochures, Lily was practically vibrating with excitement. "Oh, Helen, this is just so incredibly generous of you," Jessica had said, while her husband, Samuel, nodded in his quiet, supportive way. But looking back now, the warning signs were all there. The way Mark had insisted on managing all the bookings himself, Jessica's suggestion that I might be more comfortable in a separate hotel room, just in case the kids get too loud, Patricia's comment about how older folks sometimes prefer a different pace on vacation. They had been subtly conditioning me for separation all along. "You know what the most painful part is?" I said to the driver's reflection. "What's that?" They assumed I would just accept it, that I'd just roll over and play the part of the forgotten old woman. "Are you planning to prove them wrong?" I watched the city lights begin to twinkle as dusk approached. I'm 69 years old. I worked for 42 years as an architect. I raised a son who seems to believe I'm a fool. I didn't get this far in life by letting people walk all over me. The driver chuckled. "Now you're talking." My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Jessica. "So sorry about the mix-up, Helen. We'll bring you back a nice souvenir from Disney World. A mix-up, as if it were a simple clerical error and not a calculated act of betrayal. I thought about the 25-0 I had wired to Mark's account 6 weeks prior. He had told me it would be easier to book everything from one place. How readily I had trusted him, and how thoroughly he had deceived me. As we exited the highway and headed toward my quiet house, something inside me shifted. The pain was still raw, but beneath it, a harder, more resolute feeling was taking hold, like pressure building behind a dam. They wanted to treat me like a doddering old woman who could be conveniently set aside. They wanted my money, but not my presence. Fine. They were about to find out that this particular old woman had a few tricks of her own. The taxi pulled into my driveway just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The house looked just as I had left it a few hours ago. Neat, peaceful, and prepared for a week's vacancy. But I was not the same woman who had locked the front door that morning, filled with excitement and anticipation. That'll be 50. 2.5, the driver said. I handed him a 70. Keep the change. And thank you for listening. Whatever it is you're planning, he said with a knowing smile. I hope they have it coming. As I watched his car disappear down the street, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a number I hadn't needed in months. Arthur Vance, my lawyer. If Mark wanted to play games with 25-0, we could certainly play. But first, there was some research to be done. The key turned in the lock with its familiar click, yet everything felt different. I pulled my suitcase over the threshold, its wheels catching on the doormat I'd picked out with Robert 20 years ago. Home. I was supposed to be packing for Florida tonight, not unpacking from a trip to nowhere. I changed into a comfortable sweater and soft pants, the kind Mark always joked made me look like a retired librarian. Tonight, the description felt fitting. I had some studying to do. My office was just as I had left it that morning. Robert's sturdy oak desk sat by the window, and the filing cabinets stood against the wall like silent sentinels. Everything was organized. Everything had its place, a stark contrast to the chaos in my family. The vacation folder was in the second drawer, neatly labeled Florida 2025 in my own handwriting. I pulled it out and spread its contents across the desk. 23 documents, each one representing another piece of my shattered trust. The bank statement showing the 25-0 wire transfer to Mark's account, dated 6 weeks ago, and then the hotel confirmation, Grand Floridian Resort, Ocean View Suites. 7 guests, 10 nights. I scanned the names: Mark, Jessica, Lily, Noah, Patricia, Samuel, and Robert Miller. Robert, my husband, who had been gone for 3 years. They had put my deceased husband's name on the reservation instead of mine. The trip my money was funding didn't even have a space for me. My hand trembled as I picked up the resort brochure. It was filled with glossy photos of sunsets, families splashing in sparkling pools, and multi-generational groups gathered around festive dinner tables. It was the exact fantasy we had discussed during our planning sessions. Mom, you'll absolutely love the Ocean View Suite, Mark had promised. The kids will make such incredible memories, Jessica had added. It was all a complete fabrication. I picked up the phone, not my cell, but the old landline Robert had insisted we keep. This moment demanded a more substantial connection than wireless convenience could offer. Directory assistance put me through to the Grand Floridian Resort. Reservations, this is Brenda. How can I help you? Her voice had that practiced, cheerful tone of a seasoned hospitality professional. I need to cancel a reservation. It's under the name Miller. Let me just pull that up for you. Miller. Yes, I see it here. A reservation for 7 guests, checking in tomorrow. Ocean View Suites for 10 nights. Are you sure you wish to cancel, ma'am? The resort is absolutely lovely this time of year. I am completely sure. May I ask the reason for the cancellation? Perhaps I could offer an alternative, like a different room type or a partial stay? No alternatives. Please cancel the entire booking. There was a pause. I could hear the soft tapping of her keyboard, as she likely tried to understand why someone would cancel such an expensive and elaborate reservation. Mrs. Blank Miller, I must inform you that canceling this close to the arrival date will incur significant penalties. The total cancellation fee will be 3,500. 3,500. It was less than I spent on property taxes in a single quarter. That's acceptable. Ma'am, are you certain? This is a very substantial booking. Perhaps you'd like to speak with our guest services manager. Cancel it now, please. More typing, followed by the faint whir of a printer. The gears of official business were turning. The cancellation has been processed. You will receive an email confirmation within the hour. Is there anything else I can assist you with today? Actually, yes. When a party arrives tomorrow expecting to check into that reservation, what will they be told? I would inform them that the reservation was canceled by the primary booking party at 6:47 p.m. Eastern Time on September 5. Perfect. Mark would know the exact moment I took action, and more importantly, he would know that it was deliberate. Thank you, Brenda. You've been extremely helpful. I hung up the phone and stared at the scattered papers on my desk. In the corner sat a framed photo from last Christmas. Mark, Jessica, the kids, Patricia, and Samuel, all gathered around my tree, opening presents I had purchased, eating a dinner I had catered, all of them smiling at the generous old fool. Well, the generous part was officially over. The morning light filtering through my bedroom window felt different. For the first time since we had begun planning this supposed family vacation, I had slept soundly, deeply, and without a single dream. There was no lingering anxiety about what to pack. No bubbling excitement about seeing Lily's face when she first saw the Cinderella castle. No mental checklists of activities the grandchildren would enjoy. There was only a profound sense of peace. I showered, dressed, and went to the kitchen. The old coffee maker percolated on the counter, filling the house with the same comforting aroma that had been a part of my mornings with Robert for over 40 years. My cell phone was on the counter, right where I had left it to charge. The screen was lit up with notifications, but I ignored them as I poured my coffee and added a splash of cream. Some conversations required a clear head. Finally, I picked up the device. 56 missed calls, all from the same Orlando area code. The call log was a story in itself. 11:47 p.m., Florida time, then 11:50, 2 p.m., then 12:03 a.m. The calls had continued every 15 minutes throughout the night. 4:30 a.m., 5:15 a.m., 6:00 a.m. Mark had been up all night, and between the calls there was a flood of text messages. I scrolled through them, a spectator to his escalating panic. Mom, call me back. This is urgent. Hotel says you canceled everything. What is going on? Mom, this is not funny. Call me right now. The kids are crying. We have nowhere to stay. Call me. The timestamps painted a vivid picture. The family had likely arrived at the Grand Floridian around 3:00 p.m. Florida time yesterday, which was 6:00 p.m. here just as I was getting off the phone with Brenda. They would have walked up to that magnificent check-in desk, exhausted from their travels but buzzing with excitement, probably already debating where to have their first dinner, only to be told they had no rooms. I took my coffee into the living room and settled into my favorite armchair by the window. Outside, my neighbor was walking his beagle, the same routine they had followed every single morning for the past 10 years. It was a perfectly normal Tuesday for everyone else. My phone buzzed with another incoming call. The Orlando number. I let it go to voicemail. A moment later, the notification popped up. I pressed play. Mom, I don't know what game you think you're playing, but you need to fix this, right now. We spent the entire night in the hotel lobby. Patricia hasn't stopped crying. The kids are completely bewildered. This is cruel. It's unnecessary. And it's completely out of character for you. Call me back and fix the mess you've made. Cruel and unnecessary. What an interesting choice of words from the man who had abandoned his own mother at an airport. The coffee tasted exceptionally good. It was a special blend I'd bought yesterday morning, back when I still believed in family vacations and the joy of making memories across generations. I set my cup down and picked up my phone, scrolling to Mark's number. My finger hovered over the call icon. 6 weeks of deliberate deception. 25. 0 accepted under false pretenses. 3 months of my life spent in joyful anticipation of a trip I was never meant to take. Now Mark wanted to talk. After 56 unanswered calls, and a voicemail that managed to place all the blame squarely on my shoulders. Perfect. I had a few things I wanted to say too. I pressed the call button. Mark answered before the first ring even finished. Mom, finally. What in the world is going on? The hotel is saying you canceled our entire reservation. His voice was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. In the background, I could hear a chaotic mix of other voices, Jessica saying something about a complete disaster, and one of the children wailing. Well, hello, Mark. How was your vacation? Don't play these games with me. We have nowhere to stay. Do you have any idea what you've done? I reached for a notepad, the one Robert always kept by the phone for messages. Certain conversations needed to be documented. Actually, I understand perfectly. Tell me, when you were planning to leave me stranded at the airport yesterday, where exactly did you imagine I would be spending my vacation? There was a moment of silence. The background noise seemed to quiet down. Mom, that was a completely different situation. This involves innocent children. Were there not innocent children involved when you deliberately took my 25-0 and excluded me from the trip? It's not the same thing. I jotted down the time. 8:03 a.m. Philadelphia time. 5:03 a.m. Florida time. Mark's voice was frayed with the exhaustion of someone who had been in crisis mode all night. Help me understand the difference, son. The difference is that we are stuck in a strange place with no money, and children who are devastated because their vacation has been ruined. Interesting. Yesterday, when I was the one stuck in a strange place, the airport, you told me to just go home. What's changed since then? Jessica's voice became louder in the background. Mark, tell her about the credit cards. Credit cards? I made a note of it. Mom, we can't afford to book another hotel. Everything is booked solid because of this convention anyway. We put the whole trip on our credit cards, assuming we would pay it all off with, well, we were expecting different circumstances. You mean you were expecting to pay it off with my money while I sat at home like a piece of unwanted furniture? Stop being so dramatic. This isn't about you anymore. It's about Patricia and the kids. It became about me the moment you took my money and cut me out of my own grandchildren's vacation. Mark's tone hardened. Fine. You want to play hardball? When I get back to Philadelphia, you are going to regret this. You think you can control this family with your money? I wrote it down, word for word. You are going to regret this. Mark, are you threatening me? I'm making you a promise that actions have consequences, old woman. Old woman. I noted that as well. You're absolutely right. Actions do have consequences. For example, the consequence of betraying someone's trust is that they stop trusting you. This is ridiculous. You're punishing children because you got your feelings hurt. I am teaching adults that taking 25-0 and abandoning a family member has repercussions. We didn't take anything. You gave us that money for a family vacation, which, by definition, is meant to include family. Silence on his end, except for Patricia's voice in the distance, saying something about how she never should have listened, and that this is a disaster. Mark tried a new tactic, his voice softening into a placating tone. Mom, look, maybe we didn't handle things perfectly yesterday, but right now, we need to focus on finding a solution. Can you just call the hotel and... No? What do you mean, no? I mean the word no, Mark. It's the word you should have heard yesterday when you told me to just go home and miss out on my own grandchildren's vacation. This is insane. You're acting like some kind of vindictive. I ended the call. The living room was perfectly still after the barrage of shouting. Outside my window, a hummingbird hovered by the feeder Robert had installed years ago, its wings a blur of iridescent green in the morning sun. I looked down at my notepad. Threats, insults, financial confessions, zero accountability. My phone immediately began to ring again. The Orlando number. I switched it off and finished my coffee, watching the hummingbird move with precision and purpose from one flower to the next. Some lessons, it seemed, could not be taught with words. I stared at the notepad, where Mark's threats seemed to glare up at me from the page. "You're going to regret this, old woman." The words looked even more vile in black ink than they had sounded over the phone. Robert's reading chair sat empty by the window, the afternoon sun warming the floral cushions he had picked out 3 decades ago. I could almost picture him sitting there, his hands clasped, waiting patiently for me to ask the question he knew was on my mind. "What would you do, Robert?" But I already knew the answer. Robert never allowed anyone to push him around, not even if it meant causing friction with friends or family. He had built a successful career in architecture by standing firm against developers who thought a quiet demeanor meant a lack of conviction. "Sometimes, Helen, kindness is mistaken for weakness," he used to tell me. "Don't ever let people make that confusion." I had been kind to Mark his entire life. I paid his college tuition when his grades faltered. I co-signed the lease on his first apartment when no one else would take a chance on him. I had covered his mortgage payments during 3 different periods of unemployment, funded countless family trips, paid for the grandchildren's school supplies, and even covered the medical bills when Jessica needed surgery. All of it kindness, and all of it had been interpreted as weakness. My office felt different now, transformed into a space where momentous decisions were to be made. I opened the filing cabinet that Robert had organized with such precision. Every folder was labeled in his meticulous script. The one titled Financial, Family Support, contained the evidence of 20 years of my generosity. Bank statements showing monthly transfers to Mark's mortgage lender, receipts for Lily's ballet lessons, and Noah's hockey equipment. Medical bills I had quietly settled when Patricia needed her knee replaced. Contributions to college funds, birthday checks, Christmas gifts disguised as loans that were never meant to be repaid. It totaled over 50 in the last year alone. I found Arthur Vance's business card tucked behind Robert's emergency contact list. Vance, Associates, Estate Planning and Family Law. We had worked with him when Robert passed away, and he had handled everything with a professional grace that made an unbearable time manageable. Arthur understood the complexities of family obligations. He would also understand when those obligations crossed the line into exploitation. My investment portfolio was in the bottom drawer. Decades of statements charted the careful growth of my 42 years of work. Real estate, retirement account, savings bond. Mark had no inkling of the scale of what he was about to lose. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across my desk. Somewhere in Florida, my son was likely still scrambling for a place to stay, convinced that this was all just a temporary outburst that he could manipulate his way out of with the right blend of guilt and intimidation. He was about to learn the difference between temporary and permanent. I reached for the phone, Arthur's card held steady in my other hand. The numbers felt significant as I dialed, like coordinates for a new, uncharted destination. Justice was not the same as revenge. Robert had taught me that too. Revenge was messy, emotional, and ultimately unsatisfying. Justice was clean, proportional, and educational. Mark wanted to play hardball. Excellent. I had spent 4 decades negotiating with powerful men who assumed a woman in architecture was soft. None of them ever made that mistake twice. The phone rang twice before a warm, professional voice answered. "Vance and Associates, this is Jennifer speaking. How may I direct your call? I need to schedule an urgent consultation with Arthur Vance regarding my estate planning. My name is Helen Miller." The appointment was set for the following afternoon. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in years, waking up refreshed and resolute for the drive into the city. Arthur's office was on the 15th floor of a sleek glass tower overlooking the river, a space of polished marble and rich mahogany that radiated competence and charged by the hour for results that were worth every cent. "Helen, come in." Arthur stood to greet me, his handshake firm and reassuring. At 55, he had the calm confidence of a man who had spent his career untangling the complicated problems of others. I sat in the leather chair across from his desk and laid out my documentation like exhibits in a courtroom: bank statements, receipts, the threatening text messages, and my notes from the phone call. "What's the situation?" Arthur asked, picking up a legal pad. "My son has shown me his true colors. I began, "and I need to legally protect myself from his greed." The story unfolded methodically. The planned vacation, Mark's calculated exclusion of me at the airport, the cancellation of the hotel, the 56 desperate phone calls, and finally, the ugly threats he made when he realized his manipulation tactics were no longer working. Arthur listened intently, taking notes and occasionally asking a clarifying question that highlighted his deep experience with family disputes. "How long has this financial dependency been established?" "At least 20 years. I have documents going back to his first mortgage." "And the threats were specific?" I wrote them down verbatim. I slid the notepad across the polished desk. "You're going to regret this, old woman. Actions have consequences." Arthur studied my notes, his expression becoming grave. "Helen, this constitutes attempted financial coercion. In this state, that provides solid grounds for disinheritance with legal protections against any future challenges." "Meaning?" "Meaning, if you decide to amend your will, we can structure it in such a way that it will be virtually impossible for Mark to successfully contest it in court." The sense of relief was so immense it felt physical, like I had finally set down a heavy weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying. "I want him completely cut out," I said, my voice firm. "Everything I've built should go to organizations that will actually do some good with it." Arthur turned to his computer and opened an estate planning program. "Let me walk you through the options. We can establish a new will with charitable beneficiaries, and will include specific language detailing the reasons for Mark's exclusion." For the next hour, we worked through the details. A local children's education foundation would receive the largest portion of my estate. Engineering scholarships at Drexel University would get a substantial endowment. Funds would also go to senior services, community art programs, and veterans assistance causes that mattered, run by people who understood the meaning of stewardship. "The documentation you've brought is excellent," Arthur said, reviewing my bank statements. "It shows a clear and sustained pattern of financial exploitation. Combined with the threatening language, our case for disinheritance is ironclad." "How long will this process take?" "I can have the new documents drafted and ready for you to sign by next week. We'll need witnesses and a notary, and I strongly recommend we make a video recording of the signing to serve as further proof of your mental competency." "Whatever it takes." Arthur leaned back, studying me carefully to ensure I fully grasped the gravity of the step I was taking. "Helen, this is a permanent decision. Once this is executed, it will fundamentally alter your family dynamic forever." "They altered it first," I said quietly. "I'm just making it official." "And you're certain about this? You have no reservations about the grandchildren?" I thought of Lily and Noah, their sweet, innocent faces at family dinners I had paid for, at birthday parties I had made possible. The children will be far better served by scholarship programs that can help thousands than by an inheritance that their father would undoubtedly mismanage. Arthur nodded, satisfied with my resolve. "Then let's proceed. I will draft comprehensive documents that will exclude Mark entirely and protect your final wishes from any legal challenge." We shook hands to conclude the meeting, his grip conveying both professional confidence and genuine empathy. "I will call you as soon as everything is ready for your signature." Walking back through the marble lobby, I felt lighter than I had in years. The law was on my side, justice was within reach, and Mark was finally going to learn that actions truly do have consequences. The elevator descended 15 floors as I absorbed the reality of what I had just set in motion. Legal protection was on its way. Real, permanent consequences for Mark's betrayal, and his threats were coming. The following week passed in a state of tranquil routine, a welcome change from the months I'd spent immersed in vacation planning. I took long morning walks through my neighborhood, spent my afternoons reading in Robert's chair, and prepared simple evening meals without the need to rush for family phone calls or accommodate unexpected visits. There was no more constant checking of my phone for updates from Mark. No more worrying if Patricia would approve of the restaurant reservations I'd made or if Samuel needed special accommodations for his arthritis. There were only quiet, orderly days while Arthur prepared the legal framework that would redefine my future. On Friday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Arthur's office. "Helen, the documents are ready. Are you available to come in on Monday for the signing?" "Absolutely." Just to confirm, you remained fully committed to these changes? More than ever. Monday morning, I returned to Arthur's downtown office. This time, the conference room was occupied by additional people. His assistant, Mrs. Chen, and a paralegal named David were seated at the long, polished table, with notary stamps and official forms arranged before them like surgical instruments. This is a formal will execution, Arthur explained as he took his seat. Every detail must be witnessed and notarized to safeguard against any future legal challenges. The new will lay open in front of me, 23 pages of dense legal text that effectively translated my pain and anger into permanent, binding consequences. Page after page outlined the complete exclusion of Mark Miller from any inheritance, the establishment of charitable trusts, and the appointment of Arthur as the executor with full authority to distribute my assets according to my stated wishes. I will now read the key provisions aloud, Arthur announced, his voice carrying the solemn weight of a legal ceremony. The testator, Helen Miller, being of sound mind and clear judgment, hereby excludes her son, Mark Miller, from all inheritance due to demonstrated financial exploitation and threatening behavior directed toward the testator. The words hung in the air, powerful and absolute. Furthermore, the testator designates the following charitable organizations as primary beneficiaries. Arthur continued down the list we had so carefully crafted. The Philadelphia Children's Education Foundation would receive $500. The Drexel University Engineering Scholarship Fund would be granted $400. Senior Services, Veterans Assistance, Community Arts Programs, all worthy causes, run by people who valued gratitude over entitlement. Mrs. Chen adjusted her glasses. Mrs. Miller, do you fully understand these provisions? Yes, I do. And are you executing this will of your own free will without any coercion? Completely freely. David switched on a video camera that was positioned on a tripod at the end of the table. For the record, could you please state your full name and today's date? Helen Miller, September 2, 2022. And you are signing this document of your own free will and choice? I am. My hand was steady as I signed the official documents, each letter of my name, a deliberate and final stroke. Mrs. Chen and David then signed as witnesses, their presence ensuring that no court could ever question the validity of my decision. The notary seal made a satisfying thud as it embossed the paper, making everything official under state law. The original copy of the will shall remain in our secure vault, Arthur said, handing me a sealed envelope containing my copies. I suggest you keep one of these in an accessible place and the other in a safety deposit box. When do you think they'll find out? I asked. That will depend entirely on when you decide to inform them. I tucked the envelope under my arm. It felt as solid and protective as a suit of armor against any future attempts at manipulation. Their flight gets back on Thursday afternoon. I imagine they'll want to schedule some sort of family meeting to discuss what happened. Arthur nodded with the wisdom of experience. Family meetings that follow a crisis have a way of revealing everyone's true priorities. Outside his office building, the city of Philadelphia was alive with its usual vibrant energy. Business people hurried to their next appointments, tourists consulted maps, and street musicians played for the crowds. It was a scene of ordinary life, continuing on its course, while my own world had just pivoted on its axis. The drive home over the bridge offered a stunning view of the skyline that Robert had always loved. I felt certain he would have approved of the day's proceedings. Clean, legal, proportional justice. Mark had made his choice at the airport when he decided I was disposable. Now, he would have to live with the consequences of that choice. 2 weeks had passed since Arthur had placed the final documents in his vault. During that time, I had maintained my peaceful routine, all the while mentally preparing for this exact moment. Arthur and I had confirmed the flight details, discussed the timing, and rehearsed what was to come. Now, standing beside him in the international arrivals terminal at PHL, I felt the same calm assurance that had guided me through every major project of my architectural career. Flight 813 from Orlando has landed, Arthur said quietly, checking his phone. They should be coming through customs in a few minutes. The leather portfolio under his arm, held the documents that would finalize our mission. 3 weeks of planning, legal preparation, and emotional fortification had all led to this. Passengers began to emerge through the sliding glass doors. Sun-tanned families with Disney-themed bags, couples carrying shopping bags, business travelers already checking their phones, the typical stream of people returning from a world of fantasy. And then I saw them. Patricia appeared first, chattering animatedly to Samuel about something she had seen on the plane. She carried a large shopping bag with Walt Disney World printed on the side. Samuel followed a few steps behind, quietly maneuvering 2 large suitcases, his face etched with the patient exhaustion of a man who had been listening to vacation stories for hours. Behind them were Jessica and the children. Lily was wearing a princess dress over her jeans and clutching a small ukulele, while Noah had a pirate's cap perched on his head. Both kids looked tired but happy, their eyes scanning the crowd for a familiar face. Mark emerged last, scrolling through his phone with the preoccupied air of someone trying to re-engage with the real world. He wore a brightly colored shirt and shorts, and he moved with the relaxed gait of a man who believes his troubles are behind him. Then Lily spotted me. "Grandma!" She broke away from her parents and ran toward me, her ukulele bouncing at her side. Noah was right behind her, his face breaking into a wide, genuine smile. "Grandma Helen, we missed you so much. You have to hear about the dolphins." I knelt to embrace them, their small arms wrapping tightly around my neck with the kind of unconditional love only grandchildren can give. For a brief second, the weight of what was about to unfold felt crushing, but then I looked up and saw Mark's face. He had frozen mid-stride, his relaxed vacation posture vanishing as he took in the sight of his unexpected welcoming committee. His gaze shifted from me to Arthur, taking in my lawyer's formal suit and the leather portfolio tucked under his arm. "Mom," Mark's voice was tinged with weariness. "What are you doing here?" "I came to welcome you home," I said, standing up and gently guiding the children to stand beside me. "How was your trip?" Jessica was now at Mark's side, her expression morphing from confusion to alarm as she registered Arthur's professional presence. Patricia, however, remained oblivious to the rising tension. "Helen, what a lovely surprise. Wait until you hear about the luau we attended. And the resort, my goodness, the breakfast buffet was simply amazing." "Patricia," Samuel said quietly, his accountant's mind clearly sensing the undercurrents she was missing. "Perhaps we should." Arthur stepped forward, his movement deliberate and official. "Mr. Mark Miller?" His voice was formal, cutting through the terminal noise. Mark's face paled beneath his tan. Arthur extended the sealed manila envelope toward him with the solemn gravity of a process server. "Mr. Miller, this is a copy of your mother's revised last will and testament, executed on September 20, 2025. Mark's hands trembled slightly as he took the envelope. The surrounding sounds of the airport announcements, rolling suitcases, distant conversations seemed to fade, as everyone's attention fixated on the legal document. "What is this?" Jessica whispered, her eyes on the law firm's return address on the envelope. Mark broke the seal with a jerky motion, his vacation calm now completely gone. He unfolded the papers and began to scan the contents, his eyes flying across the dense legal text. I watched his expression shift as he processed the information, first confusion, then disbelief, and finally, a look of abject horror as he reached the section detailing his disinheritance. "This can't be real," he said, his voice barely audible. Jessica leaned over his shoulder, reading the same devastating words, the color draining from her face as the implications sank in. "Helen," she said, attempting a reasonable tone, "surely we can sort this out. Think of the children. They're your grandchildren." "I did think about them," I replied calmly. "That's why I paid $25,000 for their trip to Florida." Mark's head snapped up from the documents, his eyes blazing with the desperate fury of a man watching his entire life plan implode. "You can't do this to us. I'm your son." "Yes," I said. "You are the son who abandoned me at an airport and then threatened me when I finally stood up for myself." Patricia, at last comprehending that something serious was happening, stopped her chatter. "Helen, what is going on?" Why does everyone look so distressed? Patricia, maybe we should give them a moment, Samuel urged, gently taking her arm, but Mark had no interest in privacy. This is impossible. You can't just disinherit family. There are laws against this. Arthur spoke with professional calm. Actually, Mr. Miller, the probate laws in this state fully support your mother's right to distribute her estate as she deems fit. The documentation is legally ironclad. I'll fight it in court. Mark's voice was rising, drawing glances from nearby travelers. This will not stand. Please do, I said evenly. Arthur has already prepared for that eventuality. The video recording of my competency evaluation should prove particularly persuasive for any judge. Jessica was still poring over the legal documents, her practical mind tallying the losses. The house, the investments, everything? Everything, Arthur confirmed. The Philadelphia Children's Education Foundation and the Drexel University Engineering Scholarship Fund are now the primary beneficiaries. Mark crumpled the papers in his fist, then just as quickly smoothed them out again, as if the physical act might alter their content. This is insane. You're throwing away your family over one stupid argument. One stupid argument? My voice remained level, but I could feel Robert's resolute spirit bolstering me. Mark, you took 25-0 from me. You deliberately excluded me from my own grandchildren's vacation, and then you threatened me when I dared to object. That isn't an argument. That is a betrayal. Lily tugged at my sleeve. Grandma, why is Daddy yelling? I looked down at her worried little face and felt a pang of genuine sorrow. These children would one day wonder why their inheritance had vanished, likely never fully understanding that it was their own father's greed that had cost them their future. Sometimes, sweetheart, grown-ups make mistakes that have very big consequences, I told her gently. Mark's desperation escalated. We'll hire lawyers. We'll prove you were manipulated, that you're not in your right mind. Arthur opened his own portfolio and handed Mark a business card. I would be more than happy to provide documentation of your mother's complete mental competency to any attorney you choose to retain. A word of warning, however. Frivolous litigation can become exceedingly expensive. The family stood there, a small, unhappy cluster amidst their vacation luggage, the cheerful memories of Florida already being eclipsed by this harsh new reality. Patricia kept looking from face to face, still struggling to grasp the full magnitude of what had just occurred. Samuel, however, understood perfectly. His accountant's mind knew how to recognize when the numbers added up to a complete disaster. Mark, he said quietly, perhaps you should have considered the consequences before you acted. Mark whirled on his father-in-law. Don't you lecture me. This affects all of us. No, I said firmly. This affects the people who broke my trust. Your children are innocent. That is why I have established scholarship funds that will help children just like them for generations to come. Arthur closed his portfolio with a sense of finality. Ladies, gentlemen, our business here is concluded. He turned and walked toward the terminal exit. I followed, leaving Mark's family to process their new circumstances in the midst of the cheerful chaos of arriving travelers and happy reunions. Behind me, I could hear Mark's voice calling out, still trying to bargain, still unable to accept that some consequences are irreversible. The walk through the airport corridors felt vastly different than it had 3 weeks earlier. Then, I had been a confused, heartbroken old woman dragging her suitcase through these same halls. Now, I walked beside my attorney, a woman who had reclaimed her dignity through principled, decisive action. Arthur and I said little during the elevator ride to the parking garage. The profound weight of justice served needed no additional commentary. That went precisely as we planned, Arthur finally said as we reached his car. Better, I replied. Mark revealed his true character for all to see. No judge in the world would overturn a will after witnessing that display. The drive home took us back over the bridge as evening began to descend on Philadelphia. The city lights sparkled on the water in a way Robert had always admired, and I felt his presence, a silent affirmation of the day's events. You know they will try to contest it, Arthur said as we navigated the city traffic. Let them. Every lawyer they hire will tell them exactly what you told me. The documentation is ironclad. Arthur pulled into my driveway just as the automatic porch light flickered to life. The house looked the same as it had that morning, but everything felt transformed by the closure that justice had brought. We shook hands beside his car. "Thank you, Arthur. You made all of this possible. You're the one who did the hard work, Helen. Standing up for yourself like that took real courage." After his taillights vanished down the street, I unlocked my front door and stepped into the quiet sanctuary of my home. The familiar scent of old books and lemon polish, and the distant, rhythmic ticking of Robert's grandfather clock, welcomed me. In the kitchen, I made a simple dinner, scrambled eggs and toast, with a cup of hot tea. There was no need to consider anyone else's preferences, no schedule to accommodate. Just food I enjoyed, eaten at my own unhurried pace. As I ate, the evening light slanted through the dining room windows, illuminating the collection of family photos on the mantelpiece. Mark's college graduation, his wedding to Jessica, pictures of the grandchildren at various stages of their young lives. They were still my family, but now I could look at them without the sharp sting of betrayal. My favorite armchair beckoned from its place by the living room window. I settled into its comforting embrace with my tea and looked out at the garden that Robert had planted, and that I had lovingly tended for the past 3 years. The last few weeks had transformed me from a victim into an advocate, from someone who passively accepted mistreatment to someone who actively demanded justice. Robert would have been proud of the woman I had become, or perhaps the woman I had remembered how to be. My phone sat on the side table, still turned off since I left the airport. I had no doubt that Mark was trying to call, still operating under the delusion that he could negotiate his way out of the consequences of his actions. But some lessons can only be learned the hard way. Tomorrow, I would call the charitable organizations, the Philadelphia Children's Education Foundation, the Drexel University Engineering School, the Senior Services Program, all worthy causes run by grateful people who understood the meaning of stewardship. My money would now fund ballet lessons for children whose parents worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. It would pay for textbooks for bright students who couldn't afford them. It would provide warm meals and companionship for seniors who had been forgotten by their own families. It would do real tangible good in the world, instead of funding more vacations from which I would be excluded. The sun set behind the hills, painting my living room in hues of gold and rose. Somewhere across the city, Mark's family was likely still trying to process the enormity of their new reality. Patricia would be bewildered. Samuel would be quietly calculating the financial fallout. Jessica would be plotting damage control. And Mark would be learning, at long last, that actions truly do have consequences. I finished my tea as darkness settled over my quiet neighborhood. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, phone calls from relatives, perhaps legal documents from desperate lawyers, the logistics of updating my financial accounts. But tonight, I sat in my own chair, in my own house, enveloped in the quiet dignity of a woman who had reclaimed her self-respect. Robert's wisdom had been my guide through the darkest moments of this family betrayal, leading me to this place of peaceful resolution. Justice had been served, lessons had been learned, and my future was secure. It was enough. It was perfect. And it was, finally, completely mine.